10-Minute Jazz Lesson Podcast, episode 321. Hey everybody, welcome back to the 10-Minute Jazz Lesson Podcast, episode 321. If you are new to the show, welcome in. If you are a returning listener, welcome back in. Thank you so much for stopping by again. This week is our Tune of the Month episode, being the fourth episode of the month, and we are going to take a look at one of my favorite standards, If I Were a Bell by the great Frank Loesser. But before we get into the show, just wanted to remind you that this is a listener-supported podcast, which means we do not have any advertisements on the show, except for this brief mention of how to support us at the beginning of the episode. So if you would like to support the podcast in the form of a small monthly donation, you can do that on the Patreon platform, and in return for that donation, you do get a PDF and audio examples with every single episode. So to sign up, go over to our website, 10minutejazzlesson.com, click on one of the Patreon banners, and get yourself signed up today. Wanted to give a quick shout out to our new $3 patron. Thank you to Thomas. And just so you know, I am recording this episode very early this week. So if you do sign up this week, you will get your shout out. I'm just making this podcast really early because I have a bunch of stuff to do this weekend. So again, go over to our website, 10minutejazzlesson.com, click on one of the Patreon banners, get yourself signed up today. So, as I mentioned, today we're going to be looking at a great swinging jazz standard called If I Were a Bell. And I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with this, but Frank Loesser wrote this for a 1950 musical, Guys and Dolls, which I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with. But then, of course, in 1956, Miles Davis made kind of the quintessential recording of this on an album called Relaxin' with the Miles Davis Quintet. One of my favorite records and a very early influence on me. It included Red Garland, of course, Miles Davis, Paul Chambers, Philly Joe, and John Coltrane. And I listened to this album probably 1,000 times when I was younger. So this is a tune that I have been meaning to do for a while on the podcast, and we finally got around to it. So what we're going to do is we're going to spend most of our time analyzing the chord progression, because this is a really interesting / difficult chord progression. There's a lot going on here. So the first thing we want to figure out is what key the tune is in. It is in the key of concert F major. It is a 32 bar form, but it is a kind of a funky one, right? So this form is A, B, A, C. And there is just a lot of harmony, a lot of chordal movement going on in this piece of music. It's usually played very fast, and we are going to do the same today. So I want to just go through the chords and kind of give an overview of what's going on. I think that might be the most helpful thing for all of you out there that want to be able to play this tune. All right, so you may want to get out a piece of manuscript paper or a lead sheet for this tune, and then you can analyze it along with me. All right, so we see the first chord is a concert G7, which is really like the 5 of 5 in this key. But then quickly in the second measure, we see it move into a 2 chord, G minor 7 to C7 to our home key, F major. So that's a 2-5-1 to F major. Then in bar 5, we see a 3 chord to a 6 chord to that major 2 again, the 5 of 5. Then that again moves into a regular 2 chord to a 5. And then in bar 9, we're going back to 1. So that's the first 8 bars. That's the A section. We are actually going to see that happen again, and it's pretty simple. It's just playing off of that major 2 chord, moving to a regular minor 2 chord, 2-5-1, and then we get an extended cadence, which is 3-6 major 2, moving into the regular minor 2, 2-5-1. Now the B section is where the harmony gets a whole lot faster and the movement starts picking up steam and some kind of funky things happen. So let's start in measure 9. So we're on the 1 chord. Then that 1 chord turns into a dominant chord, which is going to be the 5 of 4. And then we go to the 4 chord. Then we actually go back to the original 5 chord, which brings us back to F major. Now in measure 12, we start a modulation to the relative minor, which is D minor. So we see an E minor 7 flat 5 to an A7 to D minor. So that's a 2-5 into the relative minor. Now we stay on that D minor chord, but the bass moves down a whole step. So we get the relative minor chord, bass goes down a step, which is leading us to a B minor 7 flat 5, which is going to start a modulation to the 3, A major. So now we have a 2-5 in A major, which is really, really interesting. It's such a bright, bright sound. And then we're hanging out on that A major chord. And then right before we go to the second half of the tune, we see a 6 chord back in the original key of F. That's going to drop us into that second A section. Okay. So now the next 8 bars, bars 16 through 24, are going to be the same as the first 8 bars. So we're going to skip over those, all right? And we are going to jump to measure 25, which is where we have our C section, okay? So now we are back into our home chord of F major 7, starting in bar 25. Then it's really interesting. We see that 1 chord become dominant again, and we know that we're going to the 4, but now in the bass, we have at concert A that's going to lead us up to the B flat. Now we see the bass still walking up. We're going to go to a B fully diminished 7th chord. And then we're going to see a 1 chord, but over the 5 in the bass. And that's a really, really interesting chord progression. So I want you to zone in on the bass notes here and hear how beautiful this little walk up in the bass is. Isn't that nice? Really just wonderful, wonderful chord writing. So after we get to that 1/5 in the bass, we go to a 4 chord dominant. That's going to lead us back down, and then we're going to end the tune with a 3, 6, 2, 5, 1. So I want you to listen to that entire last 8 bars, because if you don't hear it all together, it could be like really confusing what's going on. But I think if you interpret it with your ears, it'll make total sense what's going on here. So I'm starting in bar 25. Isn't that nice? One of my favorite progressions out of any jazz standard. Frank Lesser is just an absolute genius. So that's the progression. I realize that there's a lot going on there, but if you need to, go back and listen to the analysis again. We do so much analysis on this show that I'm hoping that most of you are getting pretty quick with it and you can follow along and there's not that much confusion. But if there is, make sure you drop me a line because I would love to clear that up for you. All right, so as far as the etude goes, I wasn't really approaching it in any specific way. However, what I did end up writing contained a lot of motivic development. And I think that's where I come from as a player. But really, I wanted to write an etude at a really fast tempo. We don't do that a lot on this show. So this week, I'm really challenging you to learn this etude at 200 BPM, which is where I'm about to play it. And if that seems like totally out of reach for you, this can be a great challenge for you, is to try try to learn something and be able to play it at this full tempo. This tune is typically played pretty quickly, so it would be a good skill for you to have, and I think that this etude is really, really fun to play at that 200 BPM. So let's check it out. So there is a lot of material in there for you to dig into, to figure out what's going on harmonically, figure out what's going on just in terms of motivic development. There's just a lot of material there. But again, the real challenge is going to be to play it at tempo. So really, really try for that this week. All right. The etude is going to be in the Patreon for all members. And then the backing track plus a demonstration of me playing it is going to be in there for the $5 members. And remember, you can get signed up for that by going to 10minutejazzlesson.com, clicking on one of the Patreon banners and getting yourself signed up today for instant access to all 321 episodes that we have ever done. Thank you to everybody that is supporting the show. We could not do this without you. As always, I hope you're staying safe and healthy out there, and we will see you next time with another episode. Have a good one, everybody. Bye.